Hey everyone, and welcome to Dungeons & Dragons Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a D&D enthusiast moving to a new town and finding someone who invites them to a game of Dungeons & Dragons, only for said person to turn out to be a creep. A story about a D&D player that makes a character concept that mostly no one on Earth would approve of, and much more. So, without further ado, let's get into some D&D horror stories. Not Even to the Table Yet? By Reddit user AnnChris17. Somehow, I have a horror story without ever reaching the table. If this doesn't belong here, I can totally delete it, or the mods can. Oh, believe me, we'll find out that it does. I, a female, had always wanted to play D&D. Growing up in a very Catholic Midwestern small town, that was impossible as a teen and a young adult. As someone who suffers from a variety of mental disorders and a case of almost unbearable social anxiety, it was even more of an impossibility. I didn't really have access to the internet either, meaning that was also out of the question. But either way, I had recently moved, and I'd been enthused to find a tabletop and board game store while exploring my new town. This was when COVID had been dying out, so I felt okay exploring as I don't really have an immune system. Steeling myself, I walked in. The store was small, cozy, and really clean. Well lit, organized really well, and there was even a table at the back where they held D&D sessions and Magic the Gathering. That's where I met someone who I'll call Matt, around my age and male. Matt was sitting at the back table and had been talking to the employee, but he saw me and said hi, seemed really nice, and genuinely excited to talk to me. He asked me if I had ever played D&D, as I had been looking at the dice since I'd always wanted to own a set, or Magic the Gathering, and I was rather embarrassed to say no, but he actually asked me if I wanted to learn how to play Magic, and if I was interested in D&D, and I said yes. He then took the time out of his day to walk me through all of the Magic, a starter set, taught me how to play, and then played a game with me. I thought this was great. I'd actually been able to talk to someone face to face and interact and learn, and I really thought this was going to be someone who I could get to know and maybe learn more about the games I had always held an interest in. We exchanged numbers and Discord usernames. He said they'd been looking for some D&D players and was amicable to a new one, me, for a campaign at the shop. He gave me the decks that he and I had played with for free, and we went our separate ways. Well, this dude seems like a really nice guy, but we know how these stories go. I messaged him that night so he could have my phone number. My phone has been broken and I was getting it fixed. That's why I was in town. And he immediately called me, or attempted to. I live in a rural area, so I wasn't able to pick up the call without it dropping. I sent him a text explaining so, and he said, "I prefer talking over phone call. Let's try a few more times." He proceeded to call about 7 more times. Uh-oh, dude is already showing obsessive behavior. Each time, he would send a text message asking me to pick up, and the call kept dropping, and it was frustrating, so I kind of could understand his messages and the amount of them. I eventually just told him that I was going to bed, and that I'd message him later. The next day, he sends me some information about the D&D game that he and his buddies were starting. Apparently, it wasn't at the shop, but about 30 minutes away from my home in his friend's house, which I didn't confirm or deny my attendance, but explained that I'd like to get to know him and his friends better before going to someone's house. He didn't really say anything, just brought up some local attractions, and talked about taking me there. At this point, I kind of started to get uncomfortable because he mentioned a lot of places that were hiking spots or bluffs that you could drive to. That is a lot of secluded places. The red flags are starting to flag now. And it didn't seem like he was really listening to me. And I just am not comfortable going somewhere like that with someone I don't know, alone. That would be the survival instinct kicking in, and for good reason. He tried to call me a few more times that night, and I panicked and just didn't answer, and decided I was just going to go to bed. That's when things started to get even weirder. As I was getting into bed, my Discord pinged. He'd messaged me there, and then tried to start a call. And then another, and another. He sent a server invite with a really odd name around 3 times in a row. I felt uncomfortable joining, so I made kind of a light joke about it. And he kind of just ignored it and refused to explain what it was. He spammed me a bunch of other really odd messages, including the same server invite, and I just figured I'd deal with it the next day because I was starting to freak out and couldn't tell if I was overreacting or not, because all social interactions are really hard for me. So I just shut my phone completely off and went to sleep. By the time I had woken up, he had sent multiple pictures of him out in bars and different locations, and then asked to take me to a bluff that was around 40 minutes away from my home for some sightseeing. Yep, no more red flags. The sirens are now blaring, like in Silent Hill. I was starting to feel really uncomfortable, so I politely declined. And then my Discord and phone was overwhelmed with a barrage of angry texts and messages, ranging from cussing me out to, quote, "Who are you? Whose number is this?" Which didn't make any sense. Or, quote, "Send me a picture of you." Well, color me surprised. I guess that dude had a girlfriend who checked his phone. It was just really weird, and I didn't even know what to do besides block him. Before I could, he sent 2 unsolicited nude photos of his genitals and requested pictures. Wow, now that is brazen AF. Getting caught by his girlfriend and still proceeding to do that? This dude has some problems. I freaked out and blocked him and his phone number. It really sucks because I really wanted to maybe try and enmesh myself in the local tabletop and board game community. But I've been too scared to go back into the store because he seemed close with the workers and definitely hung out there a lot. All I wanted was to learn how to play a game I've always dreamed of playing and maybe make some new friends. To this day, I still haven't played D&D. Man, what a creep. And it sucks that this perv is preventing OP from finding a local group to try to make friends with and get into the hobby. My advice here would be to contact the game shop, as it sounds like they host games there. And even though this creep seems to be friendly with the employees, let them know what you experienced with this dude, with receipts and all. Hopefully, they will listen and do something about him being in the store. I mean, any local business wouldn't want one person scaring away customers. And hopefully, OP would be able to go back to the store, find a game with people who aren't creepy sex pests, and make some friends in her new town. Though, if the social anxiety gets to be too much, which I can understand, since I have that as well, even though I'm on YouTube, perhaps look into getting into an online game just to get your feet wet. D&D is a great hobby and loads of fun, and I would hate to see one asshat prevent someone from experiencing the magic that is tabletop RPGs. I think we need a kitty after that story, but since I haven't had time to get new kitty footage, here is lucky when he was the like and comment kitten. He once was small, but now is a chunker. But with that, let's move on to the next post. Dungeons & Dragons player demands, quote, Aryan homebrew race. By Reddit user, FarAttention6548. About 3 months ago, I started playing D&D with some acquaintances from the game shop. The Dungeon Master and I had actually had experience playing Magic the Gathering together. He was a creative type, so he decided to homebrew a new campaign from the ground up. And when I say homebrew, I mean he pulled no punches. This campaign was to be a mishmash of different themes colliding due to the convergence of the realms. He wanted us, the prospective party, to kind of run with creativity as well. So he told us we could create our own homebrew races and classes. He would review them to make sure that they aren't overpowered, but he wanted us to go nuts with the creativity so he could build on that. There were 4 of us playing, me and 3 other guys. Guy 1 creates a dinosaur race based on Triceratops and makes him a, quote, druidic savage, which is sort of like a mix between a druid and a barbarian. Guy 2 makes a Cthulhu spawn, which ended up being similar to a Mind Flayer, but playable. His class was called a Dimensional Fiend, which is sort of like a wizard, a warlock, and a cleric. Low AC, dark powers, but also a lot of healing spells thrown in. Then I made a character that was pretty much a ripoff of Spider-Man, but blue-skinned and with multiple limbs. Then we have that guy. He was a guy we saw in the shop occasionally, and was super into collecting D&D and Warhammer 40k minis. He said his race was, quote, Aryan. But why? He then min-maxed, though more like max-maxed, the hell out of his racial stats in order to, in his words, make the most genetically superior version of a human I can. Now, I don't usually say this, but fucking yikes, bro. He also homebrewed a, quote, Alpha Warrior class, which was supposed to, quote, capture the warrior spirit of a true Aryan male. As he was describing it, we all just look at each other, like, WTF? And after a moment of silence, Dungeon Master says, we're not doing that. That guy then said, why the hell not? It's an interesting concept. You said we could homebrew anything, as long as it's not overpowered. He was very overpowered, just to be clear. Dungeon Master said, I think you know why I am not gonna allow that homebrew. I think any level-headed person would know why that would not be allowed. And then that guy tried to say, it's okay if you disagree with the racial theories behind the concept. Just treat him like a joke character. Perhaps the Dungeon Master doesn't want to roleplay to a character like that, or have his party have joke characters. Dungeon Master just said, look, maybe this game isn't for you then. I really hate to be the dick who says no to a character concept, but I am not allowing this. That guy then said, fine, I'll just play with my dumbass brothers for another effing campaign. Gee, I wonder what that family dynamic is like. He then pouted, stomped off, and then left the game store. We never saw this guy again. It was a very weird encounter, but we proceeded and even picked up 2 new players with 2 new interesting homebrews. One was a Wookiee bugbear type of monster homebrew, and the other, an elf dragonborn hybrid that played like a warlock sorcerer hybrid, but with the armor class of a wizard. Well, at least everything turned out fine in the end, and the trash seemed to take itself out here. I mean, to be so dead set on playing that character when the Dungeon Master even gave the option to make a character that was not that, to the point that the player just decided to leave instead of making a new character, just tells me that that player would have been an issue down the road. Maybe his brothers will allow that, and he can play with them. I can fully understand why the Dungeon Master would not allow that character to be a thing, because I think most people can understand that. Thankfully, they were able to fill out the party and play the game, without someone with an obsession with 1940s Germany. Let's move on to the next post. How should my group deal with this type of player? By Reddit user Zertz. So, we have this guy that plays in our group, who is a quote-unquote vet type player, as he's been playing since 3.5. I have only just started playing about 2 years ago now, but this guy is almost everything in a player you don't want at your table. Cheating dice rolls, heavy metagaming, main character syndrome, edgy quote-unquote lone wolf type. Here are some examples of some things he has pulled off. 1. We were playing Curse of Strahd, and after a couple of sessions, he decided to kill his character off because he didn't mesh with the group, but then decided to metagame and read through the whole Curse of Strahd book and build a character completely around defeating Strahd. Also tried to metagame with knowledge that his character would not have. To me, that's borderline just playing a video game at that point. 2. Would have something he wanted to do, and if he didn't like his role, act like he was just messing around. But best believe, if it was a good role, he was going to go through with it. And this is pretty regular throughout most sessions. 3. Always trying to one-up everyone. Example, someone trying to be flirty with a random NPC for fun? He steps in and tries to go way over the top. We don't want to be mean and kick him out, because that feels kinda crappy, but we are running out of options. Well, there is always the option that people in a lot of these stories don't do. Just talk to the player. Just tell them about all of the things listed in this post, and why it's making things not fun for the group. One of two things may happen. 1. He won't listen and continue doing the things listed in the post, and in that case, you can kick him. Or 2, he will be receptive and change the way he acts while playing, and then the game will be better for it. So yeah, I would just talk to him, and hopefully he will take option 2, and everyone can continue to have fun. Let's move on to today's final story. The Hardcore DnD 5th Edition Club, or How DnD 5th Edition is Serious Business, by Reddit user Bumblebee Reader. I don't know if I can really post this here, since I was laughing my ass off when this was finally over. This is my story on how I didn't survive a single session in this hardcore elitist game. I had joined the game through an advertisement and started to work on my character. Once I finished my character, the first session started. I'll refer to DM as Pearson. The story took place in Chult after the death curse ended, and was about helping a tribe of lizard folk overthrow a tyrannical king who went power crazy and was stealing the souls of people around them to become more powerful. He was doing this through some black magic and a pact he made with a demon. He also had an army of Warforged who would invade settlements to carry out his genocidal reign. I'll admit, it was an interesting premise, and it brought me in the mood. But unfortunately, things went terribly wrong in the middle of the first session, when he introduced an anthropomorphic chipmunk who would follow us around. This NPC barked orders to the party, and was telling them how to play their characters, and what they should be doing. I thought it was satire and commentary on toxic party members in general that you tend to see in games like World of Warcraft, but that sadly wasn't the case. To explain, Pearson wouldn't allow anyone to do anything in-game without running it by his NPC, and a lot of times, he would shoot it down and suggest other things instead. Pearson's NPC, which turned out to actually be a DMPC all along, was so bossy to everyone in the party that my character decided to retort and tell them that they weren't being paid by them, which was true, as they were only following us around, and that we don't take orders from him. Pearson breaks character and tells me that this is a game about teamwork, and how we can only win if we work together and not fight. I'm sitting at my keyboard and monitor, and I'm beginning to wonder if he's being serious about this. But I would soon have my answer when we got into a fight with a bunch of lizard folk who were loyal to the BBEG. We fight, and I roll poorly. Pearson's chipmunk DMPC gets annoying at me and another player who aren't lucky, and begins to look over our character sheets and asks us if we just blindly put points into things we didn't need, which only makes this whole thing more absurd. Despite killing one of the lizard folk through a crit, Pearson stops the game and says something that sounds like, "I'm sorry, you two need to learn how to do more damage and contribute to combat more. I'm removing you two and replacing you with people who know what they are doing." I don't have a chance to say anything as I'm removed from the server and sit there while wondering what the hell just happened. I guess Pearson expected me and the other players to kill things faster and have luckier dice rolls, which are beyond our control. Well, it sounds to me like this was just a bad DM that could not balance encounters. To kick people from a game because their characters aren't, quote, optimized and have a few bad rolls is just stupid. In which case, I would tell OP that getting kicked from that game was probably a blessing in disguise. Then there was the whole thing with the Furry Chipmunk DMPC, which was basically a tool used by the Dungeon Master in order to railroad the players into what he wanted them to do. So yeah, OP dodged a bullet by getting kicked, in my opinion. And here's hoping that they find a new group that has a more stable Dungeon Master. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain that guy free. Until next time.